Your practice management software doesn't spit out the lost opportunities. It spits out data that you can see, but there's hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars of loss in every small business out there that they can't put their finger on. It's just very difficult to get people thinking inside their doors rather than outside.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Orthopreneurs podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Glenn Krieger. Today is going to be a great ride for all of you because it's going to make some of you uncomfortable. It's going to make some of you feel really good. But most importantly, we're going to talk a lot about experience for customers and how to use that and leverage that to have a much better practice. And we're going to talk a lot more about that because today I've got Brian Wright, who's founder and CEO of the New Patient Group and the managing partner of WrightChat. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, welcome. I appreciate you having me on. Look forward to it.
I've been looking forward to this for a while. You're somebody I listen to a great deal, somebody whose opinion matters, who's got some really great ideas. You've spoken at Orthopreneurs Summit, and so I've really loved having you there. And who's not to say you're going to speak again at some point in the not too distant future.
Can't wait.
Let's start here. Let's have you, as I do with everybody, give everybody a little background about who you are, what you do, and how you ended up where you are now.
This is the shortest story I can make out of a very long journey. But went to University of Maryland. I was already a serial entrepreneur by the time I went there. I had a couple of very successful companies. Spent a long time arguing with the professors there, so I don't know how much I actually got out of that of going to school. Ended up in umpiring in professional baseball for 3 seasons. And I tell you that learned so much doing that from a presentation skill standpoint and having tough conversations and just building confidence. I played my whole life, never knew the umpiring side of it. Ended up doing that, was good at it, and came across a connection and ended up being CEO of a 250 location plastic surgery office based out of Los Angeles. When I took it over, it was 1 location. We grew it to 250, and about 8 years into that, I sold out and just started New Patient Group. So it's been 11 years now. New Patient Group has been around. And 3 years ago, actually it's 5 years ago, we started WrightChat out of a necessity that we'll dive into today, I'm sure, around the phones. And that's kind of the story, man. I've studied the consumer for years. Don't want to call myself an expert in that, but I do want to call myself an expert in that. And what moves them, what drives us to buy, what motivates us to do things, and that's what New Patient Group is. We just found a niche in the orthodontic space, and we've just taken off ever since then.
Right on. So let's go right there. Let's start with New Patient Group. Explain to everybody out there what exactly New Patient Group is, what you do, how you work with people, and what the goal is.
Yeah, simply put, we're an experience company. I am a big believer that experience, whatever you want. If you want your patients to be more compliant, you need to think experience. If you want conversion to go up, if you want to charge more, if you want to attract people to call you, if you want good employees to work for you and repel bad ones, it's all experience. And I think the mistake, whether you're looking in the restaurant industry, orthodontics, whatever, the mistake I think a lot of business owners make is they think experience is, my people are nice. And it goes into so much more than that. And we're an experience company. We teach people, there's really 3 things we do under one roof. It's helping you build a better culture. It's training your team on unique skill sets, sales, verbiage, presentation, psychology. And then we also do digital marketing. And the whole philosophy behind the whole thing is to help businesses get what they want by delivering more than expected. And we all can relate. I always use the restaurant. I'm a foodie, so I always use the restaurants, but I think it's easy for people to get. But we train, if you can relate it to the restaurant world, how you can train a waiter to get somebody to buy a $200 bottle of wine rather than 1 glass of it, right? And make people feel special while spending more. And there's an art to that. And we've worked with restaurants, we've worked with all kinds of businesses, but the niche ended up being in orthodontics. And it just is amazing the success the customers have if they just shift the mindset from I need advertising and pay-per-click to what can I do uniquely inside my doors. And the beauty for all of you out there in the ortho world is you're charging $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a pop. You're not a $10 a plate restaurant. So a few no-shows here and a few leaky holes in pending treatment and a few leaky holes in the TC world and on the phones. Next thing you know, it's a $500,000 loss for a single owned practice.
Yeah.
And the problem with that, though, is it doesn't always show up on the data sheet. So I think people are looking for the wrong things when they need to be looking inside their doors. It's just a challenge to get people to have that mindset. When you train your team on unique skill sets that would make them successful in any business outside of the ortho bubble, when you train them on those skill sets, it is absolutely amazing what happens. And it's been a fun ride.
You work with a lot of names that I know you can't say right now, but a lot of names of people who everybody listening sees on stage. Uh, some of the heavy hitters work with you, and some people with really big practices have gotten there in large part because of what you've taught them. But let's talk about experience just a minute or two, if you don't mind. So I always like to tell whenever I train a TC, and that's what I did for years, is I would travel the world teaching clinical photography. And I learned after teaching clinical photography as a restorative dentist, it was one thing to have great images, and everybody in ortho, and you can appreciate this, Brian, they 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 flock to clinical information like moths to a flame, right? I could say in one hand, I've got the secret to making $5 million a year and a 10-step program guaranteed to get you, $5 million a year cash money. And the other hand, I'm going to show you how to correct class twos every time. Even though they know how to correct class twos every time, most of them, while they won't admit it right now when they hear this, would instantly go to the clinical side over the money side all day long for a whole variety of reasons, right? And so
Yep.
when I had great clinical images, that's what they wanted to hear. But I used that as a hook to teach them how to get better case acceptance. Because here I was, a restorative dentist, routinely getting people to say yes to $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 cases. And it starts with what you're talking about, experience.
Yep.
So I always teach every one of my new TCs when they come in that their job is never to talk dentistry. Don't talk dentistry at all. Your job is to be that server at the restaurant that everybody loves so much, they just want dinner to keep going. And they want
Yep.
to listen to your suggestions, they want to buy what you have to sell, and they like you. So your job is simply to have people like you and get a great vibe from what's going on.
Yep.
So
Yep.
what are some examples of places where people mistake what they're doing for a good experience? And I'm sorry, I know it's a broad question, but I want people out there to hear that they go, oh, I don't need to know this. What are some of the things you see that people accidentally are doing that gets in their own way?
5-hour presentation coming in the shortest amount of time. Because
Yeah,
you
can you
said a lot of the things we teach.
teach me the entire Bible while I stand on one foot?
Yeah, right now. So I
Yeah.
credit. So what we teach is going to attract forward thinking people. It just is. So if we pick this up and we recreated it in the restaurant space, we're going to attract Guy Fieri, Bobby Flay, and Gordon Ramsay. Just like we've done in orthodontics, attracting basically any doctor you see that's on stage or faculty for a line on the dental monitoring speakers, the OrthoFi speakers, they're almost all our customers. But trying to get the masses to think the way they do is really difficult. And again, this just isn't orthodontists, or this is any entrepreneur, business owner on the planet.
Right.
And like I said earlier, there's so many mistakes people make when thinking experience. But let me break it down this way. Every business has two experiences, right? So in your world, you've got the clinical experience, but you also have the practice experience, but then you also have all the non-clinical, the business experiences, how people are spoken to on the phones, the content you're creating on your digital marketing channels. When people type in Invisalign as an example, what does your website look like? Your YouTube station? Is there content that makes you different and unique compared to the other 20 places I could call? And kind of off the cuff, just real thinking about this, and this is something that I think is an important lesson for everybody. Two things is one, when you become, and I know this terminology isn't positive, but when you become commoditized. So there's 6 Italian restaurants within 20 miles of your house, or 10 minutes of your house. The restaurant that has the best food no longer wins. That, of course, is part of the recipe and a very, very important part of the recipe. But the person that ends up winning that game is the culture, is their digital marketing content. how you just described. Can the waiters upsell the table while the table feels really damn good about it? Do they know how to present desserts in a way to get somebody to buy the most expensive one that otherwise wouldn't have bought one at all? How do you get them to sell and present the specials in a way to get each person to buy a $20 more expensive special for the evening rather than the on menu? And there's an art to all of that. But it's critically important to understand that the clinical skill sets, just like the chef abilities, is not enough when you're commoditized to win at the highest possible levels. The other piece, and I see this with clinicians, and I fall into it. So I fly planes, have my license, and then being like I said, being an umpire in professional baseball, I can pilot nerd you all day long. I can, rule book nerd you all day long. But the problem is just like with all of you, is that whatever passion you have doesn't mean the person that you're talking to has
Right.
that same passion.
Exactly.
And if they do, I mean, that's usually, you call that person a friend a lot of times, right? You have things in common, you talk about the same stuff, blah, blah, blah. But if you become in the clinical weeds, that's a good way to talk people out of buying from you. And that's where, I think we're down to earth people. I'm proud to have the biggest names in this industry as customers. It's something I'm really proud of. We have a 99% customer retention rate. We rarely lose them. And I'm proud of it. But we're down to earth, and I just think that it's really, really hard to convince the masses in any industry that there's really three things that you need to kick butt, no matter what business you are. And you've got to have a great culture, which means your leadership team has to have ongoing training on how to be great leaders. You've got to commit to training your people in a way that other people business, and that's what, forget orthodontists, what other people business, people over procedure operation is out there. You've got to train your team how to interact in a way that other people won't. And you've got to commit to putting in the work to creating digital marketing content that makes you unique. And everyone's business is a story. A restaurant has it, because we're on that topic, and you all as orthodontists and all the other doctors that might be listening, you're a story. Your culture starts that story. Your digital marketing is another chapter. Your new patient phone call is another chapter. What happens before they show up, when they show up, all of these are their own unique individual businesses. And we just, with New Patient Group, happen to take that journey under one roof and help you with every one of those chapters. You're not required to get the whole thing, but that's the reason why I founded the company. Is every consumer interaction, make sure your brand is advancing forward, because all it takes is one negative interaction, or not even negative. There's just sometimes people don't know what to say. They don't know what they don't know, so they may be saying things that cost them sale, and you can't. Your practice management software doesn't spit out the lost opportunities, right? It spits out data that you can see, but there's hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars of loss in every small business out there that they can't put their finger on. It's just very difficult to get people thinking inside their doors rather than outside.
You need energy to implement this. You can't do this like, hey, everybody, we got an idea today. We're going to go ahead and we're going to really step up our game, and it's going to be amazing. And Susie here is going to run it, right? You need a lead, right?
Yep.
Do you get a lot of people? Let me rephrase the question. I'm going to lead the witness here, because in your line of work, in my line of work, we work with a lot of orthodontists, and we know how it works. And you probably get a huge amount of people who go, yeah, I want more patients. Yeah, I want to be able to charge more. Yeah, I want to have a great, and then you tell them what has to happen, and you go, oh,
Yep.
I didn't realize it would take that much work. I didn't know it would cost that. Talk to me about some of the common objections that people make over doing this sort of thing. And you don't have to, but I will rip apart why most of the time they're BS.
Yeah, and I think this is another reason why we have a lot of the bigger names in orthos. They're willing to put in the work. I'm just flat out honest with everybody, is that if somebody tells you that we have a solution and you just sit back and relax and enjoy the ride, I would run away from that. Like, no matter what your partner is, whether it's a remote monitoring, whether it's us, whether it's my other company, WrightChat, Clear Line, whatever it is, you have to be involved. And the frustrating part, and this is, again, not just an orthodontist, this is why the majority of small businesses go out of business. You all, an orthodontist, in orthodontics, you're lucky because the amount of leaky holes that exist in all of your practices, you can get by and still make a ton of money with those there. Those same leaky holes in a restaurant, in a plumber, lawyer, etc., those people go under. And yeah, it's work, but there's so many things. If you take your new patient no-shows as an example and multiply that times the last 12 months times $6,000 average case fee, all of you out there have $100,000 to $500,000 revenue loss just there. So if you say, I'm going to train my receptionists how to sell, I'm going to revamp my after they hang up and before they show up processes, all of you grow $100,000 without spending a nickel on advertising. But yeah, you have to put in some work. And that's where the culture has to come in, because you've got to hold people accountable and you've got to have a business that innovates. And that requires you being a leader. And otherwise the phone training doesn't get implemented. And that's off the cuff here, but that's why WrightChat ended up being born 5 years ago, because we kept training other people's employees and they would either leave or, they were untrainable, whatever it is. And I had a bunch of new patient group customers just ask me to start WrightChat and just do it for them. And that company has exploded because that's one of those companies that you don't have to do a lot of work. But on new patient group side, yeah, that's the number. I think the number one objection is I don't need it. Right. And going back to what you said, it's a mindset of I need to grow. So what can I do for my TC? And, what advertising can I do to get the phone to ring more? Meanwhile, you're missing 3 to 5 new patient calls a month during the regular business hours when you're fully staffed. The TC is only one part of the journey. Matter of fact, I've got data that if you transform your phones, that has more of an impact on your starts than your TC ever will. But when you combine the two together, it is an unstoppable force. But you have to commit to coaching, training, and holding people accountable. And that's just not what a lot of business owners like to do. And I love doing it because I love seeing the hourly employees transform their skill sets and they get to advance their career and receive more money. But the business just skyrockets. It is just very, very difficult to get people to look at themselves and their team as the number one marketing investment they can make. And that's your competition, everybody out there. Yeah, is the guy down the street, girl down the street? Yeah, that might be. But your real competition is you and your team. If you just fix that and are ongoing working on that, you will kick ass. It's just a shift of mindset on what a lot of times this industry, I think, has been taught for years.
There was a question I asked in Orthopreneurs recently, and you hit the nail on the head because, again, the funniest thing is, and I really don't care who I piss off. I don't, because anybody who knows me knows I always speak honestly and from the heart. Sometimes I say something wrong, and I'll admit it. And like Peter Dawson, the great teacher of our generation, said, when you quote me, date me. When did I say it? Did I say it 5 years ago? Did I say it 12 years ago when my opinions were different? But I will tell you, this has not changed from the first day Orthopreneurs started. And you don't have to comment because I don't want to get you in trouble. But orthodontists, on the whole, can be harder to deal with than the patients they complain the most about, right?
Yeah.
Because you'll give them a solution to make them more money. And I'm not talking about me. Take me out of the equation. I see people provide them with solutions to make their practices better. They'll complain, I can't get staffing. Great, here's a way to reduce staffing. Oh, I don't want that. I don't bring home enough money. Here's a way to bring home more money. Oh, that's too much work. Or the best one is I put a post in Orthopreneurs last week from the recording here, where I said, if you're not currently using remote monitoring, I didn't mention a name. There's multiple remote monitoring platforms out there. If you're not currently using remote monitoring, why? Is it cost, systems, personnel, whatever? The number one answer by far was like 80% of the answer. You know what it was, Brian?
Let me guess.
I'm doing just fine without it.
Yeah.
Which is, with all due respect, is arguably the most, it's such a classically ignorant response that you and I see nonstop from my peers who are so sure they have all the answers that it's so crystal clear how wrong they are. Why do I say that? Because taking that one argument of remote monitoring, you and I could sit here with any orthodontist and say, don't listen to the people who've never used it, and don't listen to the people who are using it improperly. but I'm going to give you 10 people who are using it properly, who are making way more money with way lower stress and have a way better life and take more time off and are more profitable. But you're listening to the 6 or 8 people who don't know what they're doing, who are telling you why not to. So you're just doing just fine, right? Would you agree with me on this one?
100%. And I'm the same as you. I will call it how it is. And I think that's a big part of why we have a very niche following, and we probably make other people mad, but I'm okay with that. I would rather tell you the truth than code it for everybody. But if you look at, again, going back to what can you do to enhance the customer experience? That's your culture right there. What can you do to offer unexpected experiences to help drive what you want? And it is a challenge because a lot of you make a ton of money. But if you ran your orthodontic practice, if you ran any business in the entrepreneurial world that way, you'd go under. And it's hard to get people who are bringing home a lot of money to change a lot of times, because they don't realize they should be bringing home twice the amount while working less. And, I was a speaker for dental monitoring for a long time, but then when Align brought me aboard as faculty, that kind of relationship's not over, but I don't speak for them as much. And looking at that, if you look at a great innovations, Netflix, Tesla, Richard Branson in the airline industry, most innovations come from people that are outsiders of that industry. Because there isn't a consumer on the planet that would look at remote monitoring as a bad idea. The only people that could ever look at that as a bad idea is people stuck in the bubble that have done it the same way their whole lives. Like there's nothing about remote monitoring operated right that could ever do anything but help grow your practice in a whole sort of areas. And as an example, if let's say we have a new patient group practice near whatever, call it Detroit. And the consumer goes in ours, one that we're training and helping them run it. And then they go to 3 other opinions that aren't doing remote monitoring, and they're not outsourcing, and they're not a people first business, and the team isn't trained. We will get that consumer to buy from our practice at a higher dollar than all of those other opinions they seek. And a remote monitoring is a big reason why. And, the bias around, I did a presentation at Mother of Pearls a couple of years ago for DM around all the bias that they hear and that we hear. And bias, I mean, it's to be human, but bias is, when you're flying a plane, I always tell this story on stage, not always, but a lot of times, is when you're flying a plane and you're stuck in the clouds in IFR conditions, you only can look at the instruments. And a lot of times you feel like this happens to a lot of private pilots when they get killed in IFR, when they're socked in, as it happens on takeoff, is when you're climbing, the plane can make you feel like you're doing all kinds of weird stuff. And if you're not looking at the instruments, your bias can say, okay, I feel like we're going left, but the instruments are saying we're going right. And you have to trust the data on the instruments in front of you. And it's the same way in business. How you feel about something doesn't matter. And it's so hard. It doesn't matter. And it's so hard to convince people of that stuff. I mean, it just like, if you feel you're a great leader, great, but you can get better. If you feel like you've got a good team, great, they can get better. And what you said about, everybody out there, you have to understand the difference between, and if the only thing you take away today is what I'm about to teach, it'll change your life. But very few people can wrap their head around this. You cannot lump costs and investments into one category. Remote monitoring, perfect example. That is an investment. It is not a cost. Your practice management software, probably a cost. Your electricity cost, et cetera. Your rockstar employees are an investment. The other ones are a cost. It's what's keeping your doors open today versus what's advancing you forward tomorrow. That's how you kind of differentiate between those two. And if you do, and you're constantly looking to invest more, like you can't say a company is too expensive when that company would produce a return on your time, your chaos, your money. That is an investment. And this industry is hard because you're right. You could have a solution and hand it to a lot of you out there that will solve it overnight, or sometimes it may take time, but you'll still find a reason not to do it. But then you keep complaining about the same problem. And it's definitely frustrating. It's take action.
By the way, Brian, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in there real fast because I'm going to forget if I don't say it. just so people don't think this is Brian Wright and Glenn Krieger dumping on orthodontists, I want to let them know that speakers dump on them as well.
Yep.
Because I've spoken to at least a half a dozen to a dozen, somewhere in that range, well-known speakers who I said to them, gosh, you are so generous with the amount of information you give about how you run your practice on stage. You give every single secret. And at least a half a dozen to a dozen have said to me, I love teaching, but I got to be honest. I said, aren't you worried about somebody like who works here, like taking all your, they go, no, 99.9% of the people in the audience are never going to implement what I teach them.
Yep.
Okay, so folks, this is not me, this is not Brian. I know for a fact that when I do a QR code and say, here's a free thing on X, Y, and Z, I know the download rates. You know the download rates, Brian, and the overwhelming majority of people, they talk a really good game, but they are blessed or lucky that they're in a profession where unless you have both your hands up your butt and are rude and nasty and causing malpractice on a regular basis, you're going to make a decent living. But that doesn't mean, I mean, to many people, that's good enough. I'm happy. I make a good enough living. But the idea of, say, investing in a mastermind group like Orthopreneurs RD, you know how many times I've had people say, I won't spend $10,000 a year on a mastermind. Oh, cool. Because by joining, you're probably going to make 50 to 100,000, if not more per year from the, I mean, like you said it best, cost versus investment. There's, and I got to be honest, there's another side, which is also a belligerence of, well, I'll never do that. Why? Oh, because I just wouldn't. Okay, cool. And so you and I could go on for days about this because we are rare in the sense that we know the industry and we get to see it from without, not from within as well.
Yep.
And I don't want to run out of time because we're already about 25 minutes into this. I don't want to run out of time without you talking a lot about WrightChat. Do you want to jump in and talk about that a little bit? And I'll finish that last segment on a positive note, which is I've written about this and I've spoken about this on my podcast. I don't care who you are that's listening. I don't care how accomplished you are. I don't care how much money you're making, how successful you think you've been in business, how much your patients love you, and how much your parents love you or your spouse. You can live a better, lower stress, more profitable life if you do what the best people on the planet do, which is invest in continuous learning and, most importantly, understand your place in the world, which is you don't know jack. And the moment you understand that and realize that I am nothing and that I can learn so much more, which is my approach every single day, which is the lesson I learned from the people I respect the most, that's when your true growth is going to happen. And if you think I'm making this up, this is what we talk about in my therapy sessions with my therapist. The people who need therapy the most are the ones who are the most resistance to go into therapy. The ones who are in therapy more often than not are the ones who don't need as much work. So anyway, sorry for that diatribe there, but I want everybody out there listening, this applies to them.
Well, what you said last there, so this is the part, and it does aggravate us internally, and we talk about it, is that most of the people that hire us, you look at them, they don't even need us, right? It's because they, like you take Mark Olson, Regina Blevins, Jamie Reynolds, Boyd Whitlock, John Graham, Stu Frost. I could go on. I'm leaving out Bob Skopak. I'm leaving out David Boschkin. I could keep going on.
These are amazing practices. Yeah. And every one of those people is a constant learner. Every one of those.
The difference. And in our mastermind group, we talk about this. This is how not only do they get ahead of all of you out there, then they start stomping on throats because they won't stop learning. They won't stop changing. They won't stop implementing. And it's all to make it a better experience for the customer.
And themselves. And themselves. It's to make it a better experience for the customer, which by doing so, and just not that, it's all that every name you mentioned is buried in technology. Look at Boyd Whitlock. Look at Bob Skopak. I mean, look at Jamie Reynolds, inventor of OrthoFi, right? Look at Bob Skopak, who's a huge user of remote monitoring, right? Whose practice is, he has more free time on his hands, people, doing more production than you're doing because he's embraced technology. And I got to be honest, I love you, Bob. I love this guy. Bob ain't 35 years old, folks. Right?
No, he's not.
These are people who are mature, who know what they're doing. Take a lesson from Brian here. It doesn't have to just be new patient group. It doesn't have to be just remote monitoring. It doesn't have to just be Orthopreneurs RD. It can be everything. It can be some of it. But whatever
Yep.
you're doing, I'm telling you now, you can do more, so you have more free time and make more money. And speaking of which,
Yep.
talk about WrightChat. I want to give you a
So
chance to talk
right,
about WrightChat.
yeah. So WrightChat, and this is it's an interesting story. So, and all of you face this. You can all relate to this, where you hire somebody to train you. And really, all of you face three scenarios. If you bring in us to coach you, if you bring in somebody else, whoever you're going to face three scenarios. You have, these are make believe names. You have Judy, who's a go getter. She's intelligent, and whoever you bring in, she'll do whatever it takes to kick butt, learn it, and go execute it. Now, those are few and far between, but everyone out there, you probably have somebody like that. Well, then she gets pregnant and leaves, right? So you're stuck with whoever you hired to train this person. The trainer's gone, so is the employee, and you're back to square one. We all deal with this. And this is something, as I tell this, I know a lot of you are worried about HR headaches and things, but everyone understand every small business is dealing with the HR problem. Everybody deals with it, and there are solutions, and we're diving into one of them right now. The other employee is the one that wants to be Judy, right? She does work hard. They're just not intelligent enough a lot of times to grasp it and could grasp the information and go do it at a high level. But there's always a role for those people in your office. But that's scenario two. And then a lot of times those people, whatever it is, pregnancy, they quit, they take a better job, whatever it may be, you lose them too. And then you have scenario three, which is unfortunately the most common. And that's people that no matter what you try to do, they don't care. They're just there for a paycheck. They're a pain in the butt. They drive down your morale and you want to get rid of them. You choose not to because you got to have somebody to wait the tables to open the doors. And those are kind of the three scenarios all of us face as business owners in any industry. Well, what happened on the new patient group side is people would buy our phone course. They would come to events. They would listen to me talk about how you can use the phones to sell and psychologically prepare to buy and get people to show up. And the way we teach the phones is a total game changer for the practice. Well, what happened is we would train other people's employees, and one of those three scenarios would arise. So you're always going back to square one. So I had several of those doctors that I mentioned before. Almost all of them are WrightChat customers as well. And they asked me to start a company that just answered the new patient phone calls for them, speak as their own employees, but have me hire them and us train them and us be in control, remote into the software and schedule them. And that, as well as, the fact people don't leave voicemails. Answering services made a ton of money and they had their purpose and they had their day. But the days of people leaving voicemails at your office and waiting for you to call back, those days are gone. If I hit Invisalign into Google and I get 20 options, if you don't answer now, somebody else, whoever answers that call, is going to get the business or at least get them scheduled as a consult. So we have two options with WrightChat. We can take over and answer all of them, and we guarantee a 30% reduction in your new patient no-shows when we're answering as primary. Or we can be the backup, and it comes to you first, splits off after 3 rings if you miss it, and we answer it. And again, speak as your employee and remote in. And in those case scenarios, we usually, there's some asterisks to this. We usually guarantee that we triple your return on investment because we have the data. Every one of you listening out there, you are missing, let's just say you're a 30 new patient a month practice. Every one of you out there, I guarantee it, is missing 2 to 5 new patients a month when you're fully staffed right in the middle of the day. And you're missing those calls, and you're missing them because of mostly the chaos and the stress and how the business is run. You're not outsourcing, blah, blah, blah. But that's WrightChat, and it's gone. I didn't know if people outside of the new patient group family were going to want it, but it's growing it's consistent growth. It's enough to keep we're scaling, we're growing, but we're still offering the services if we only had 1 or 2 customers. So it's scaling with a high level of customer-centric focus, and it's helping practices a lot.
I think you're doing some really, really cool things. And again, what I like about you, one of my favorite things about you is you're not going to sugarcoat it, right? You're not going to be a jerk about anything. You're going to be a straight shooter and tell people, look, if you want to get results, this is what you need to do. If you don't want to do this, it's the same thing we tell patients. If you have a boutique practice, here's my fee. Well, it's a lot. Will you come down? There are many, many practices that don't negotiate their fee. right? And they looked at, like, when I was a restorative doc, I can't speak as much in ortho, but when I was a restorative doc, the fee was whatever, $68,750. Can you bring it down? No, I will not bring it down. This is my fee. I promise you, I will treat you like gold. This will be a spectacular
Yep.
outcome that I will stand behind, and this is the fee. And
Yep.
9 times out of 10, maybe more than that, let's call it 95 times out of 100. Okay, I just wanted to ask. Cool. When do you want to get started? Right now? Cool. Right? It
Yep.
was, we made money the problem, they didn't. And so
Yep.
Brian's always going to be a straight shooter with you. He's going to tell you what you should do, what you shouldn't do. Before we wrap this up, what have I missed? What else do you want to talk about? Is there anything else that's on your mind? Because here's your opportunity.
I mean, we could make this a 5-hour podcast, right? But
We could.
my best friends are all of you. If you look at, I mean, the doctors I mentioned earlier, they come and stay at my house. I know their kids. We are a close knit family. So I tell you the truth, but that truth has attracted the most forward thinking, and they're great clinically, but they also understand that they have to plate their food right to get people to buy it. They've got to do the business things and learn
Yep.
how to sell, and the hospitality skills and all that. It doesn't mean you stink now. It doesn't mean that you're a dummy. It doesn't mean anything. All of you are is some of the smartest people on the planet, which I think makes it difficult for a lot of you to admit you need help. Right? You're used to graduating the top of the class and kicking ass and blah blah blah. And then, some of you out there, you're running a rock star business, and I have found sometimes those are the easiest to grow more. If you're running, like a lot of the names I talked about, those are people we come in and grow 30+%, year one, because they're great, but they still have leaky holes. And all of you have leaky holes, and it's not an insult. We all do. God knows I do. But you got to seek help. And, on the new patient group side, just want to mention, we guarantee your best 12 months ever or your money back. Like, we have the data to know that we can back that up. We have the data on WrightChat to say we guarantee we'll triple your return on investment. And one other thing WrightChat does, I forgot to mention, is we just implemented pending treatment follow-up. So brand new service, and we're rolling that out. So now we plug the front end and then the back as well, and makes a tremendous difference. But yeah, I just, the number one trait of billionaires, with a B, billionaires, is they have a coach. So you have the smartest entrepreneurs on the planet. The number one trait is they have a coach. So the question is why don't all of us have one? Right? It's not a sign of stupidity or weakness. It's actually a sign of being really freaking smart. And get help. And a lot of you who don't realize that you even need it, you do. Again, the new patient no shows. And again, one last thing, I'll finish on this. When you're obsessed with finite data and you're constantly looking at the numbers and production and conversion and my starts and all this stuff, which is what a lot of you do, and you pay companies out there that give you that data. The problem with it all is that when you hire companies to help you fix it, it may or may not work. When you hire to fix the ongoing, if you hire with a mindset that says all I want to do is make my employee experience better and my customer experience better, and of course mine too, right? That's the recipe. You've got to have a great business owner experience and great employee experience, and only then can you knock it out of the park for the customer and the patient. And if you're always thinking and talking to your team, what can we do tomorrow to make the patient experience better than we did today? If that's the mindset, every time you bring in a company like us that's purely focused on the infinite data, right? That's the stuff you can control. You cannot control the paper, but you can control teaching your team how to ask for referrals. You can control how you speak in the new patient call, how you speak in the exam, et cetera, et cetera. You can control that stuff. So that should be your focus. And if it is, it always works. You will always win the marathon game. You just may not win the sprint. Right? Sometimes it takes some time to get it implemented, but it's amazing what can happen when you train hourly employees on executive level skill sets. It is unbelievable, and that's all we do, right? I mean, we apply. There's other services, yeah, but that's really all we do, and it's a win-win for everybody involved. And I just want everyone to make a move. And the down economy, man, I get it. The down economy scares people, but the names I just mentioned are all having some of their best years ever, and they don't advertise. And that's what I want to get across to everybody is you do not need pay-per-click. You do not need advertising to have your best year ever. You've just got to shift the focus and you will forever win, no matter what the economy is doing.
Awesome. So last, I'll leave you with this. If someone wants to get a hold of you or wants to learn more, I know you've got a podcast. What's it called?
New Patient Group Podcast.
New Patient Group Podcast. And if someone wants to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
So 2 ways. So if you go to newpatientgroup.com, you can just fill out a contact form on there. The other way, if you're interested in WrightChat, it's just WrightChat.com, and you can fill out a contact form on there. If you're interested in both, just whichever contact form you fill out, just say I'm interested in both. And we're currently offering, we don't do this a lot, but we're currently offering on-site workshops with me flying out to your practice. That is a scalability problem for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But right now we're doing it. It's a newer service that we implemented. And for your listeners out there, we can work with them on a 30% discount on that. So
Wow,
I'd like to
very
tell
generous.
everybody that. And yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. I know you have we have a niche following ourselves, and we're introduced as having an underground cult following, which I think is really cool the way they introduce us. But you guys you're great. I believe in what you do too. You have a very large following, to say the least. And
Thank you.
I appreciate you having me on, and everybody out there. I love to help. It's so frustrating when somebody doesn't let you help them. And that's the piece is we just want to coach. We love it. We are coaches, not consultants. And that is a big difference on why what we do works and why we guarantee the numbers.
I want to say thank you for
Thanks,
being
man.
here, being a part of this. Hope to see you at some future summit. That'd be great. And and I'm sure we'll get some great feedback from this interview. I think with a lot of hate mail directed specifically at me by people with very thin skin who don't want to change their lives and don't like being told that they can get better with hard work.
Yep.
And so I welcome those. Much love to you, Brian, and just wishing you a wonderful day, sir.
Thanks, man. Back at you. Appreciate you having me. Bye, everybody.